in the room, and with us in the room today is Trevor Lunn and John Stewart. And members joining us virtually is Pat Sheehan, Emma Sheeran, Pádraig Largy and Alex Easton. Okay, thank you. Members, you're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and I don't know if mine is yet. I might have to check it quickly. But and if members are content to proceed through the agenda, I'll move forward. I have received no apologies to date. Have any other members received any apologies that they wish me to note? No? Okay. The first bit of business that I wanted to deal with today, and I want to probably wait, and I'll offer our support to Diane Dodds, our committee colleague, because as everyone will know, she received disgusting online abuse, and I just want to offer the support of this committee. And I think all politicians know what this is like, but her particular abuse in New Year's Day was particularly disgusting. And I just want to offer the support and well wishes to her and her family. You know, we may be in political conflict with other parties and political parties, but it is never and it's inexcusable to treat people with such disrespect, and it's really inhumane. And I think, you know, people forget that politicians are also, you know, real people. We have real families, and we have real feelings and emotions. And I know that I myself took a break from social media over the Christmas period, and I did it because of my mental well-being. And I think we need to offer and come in behind our colleagues when they experience such a level of abuse that Diane received over the Christmas period. And unfortunately, she's not in the room at the moment, but I will express that on behalf of the committee, and perhaps we could write to Diane and offer that in writing to her as well. Okay, members, can I remind you that at the meeting on the 1st of December, the committee agreed to table a motion for the approval by the Assembly of the Statement of Principles for the handling of complaints for a debate in January 2022. The wording of the motion is actually on page 5 of the meeting pack. Can I remind members that the motion is scheduled to be debated on Tuesday the 18th, and the indicative time is 11:05 a.m. But obviously it could be subject to change as it.
Yeah, that's changed to 4:30.
Oh, it's changed to 4:30, and it could change again, but we'll keep you updated. Can I will introduce the motion, and my colleague, John Stewart, Deputy Chair, will be happy to wind. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Happy with that, Chair.
Okay. Item number 3 in the agenda is the draft minutes. Members, the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 15th and 17th of 2021 are on pages 6 to 17 of the meeting pack. So, members, if you're content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting, I'm happy to sign.
Happy to approve, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Item number 4 on the agenda is matters arising. Members, concerns have been raised with me by the victims and survivors that the review may not be complete before the Assembly dissolves for the election, affecting the potential for this committee to scrutinise the review. Can I seek your agreement to ask the Department to come before the committee to provide an update of the review? Indications are at this stage that the review is potentially going to be completed at around about the 10th of March, is my understanding. Now, if that is the case, then that review will move to the Executive Office, to the First and Deputy First Minister. So, you know, the time span for the dissolving of this particular mandate is 3 weeks, probably less than 2 weeks really after that. So it would be incumbent upon the First and Deputy First Minister, I believe, to come back to this committee and give us a briefing as soon as possible after the 10th and after they get time to scrutinise and evaluate the review. But I think it's important, based on the work that we're currently involved with the victims and survivors, that we get an update and can make recommendations even if it is at the close of the mandate. Have any other members any matters arising? Okay. Right, our first oral briefing is with the junior ministers this afternoon, and it's on EU matters. Can I refer members to pages 19 to 46 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers, and pages 3 to 16 of the tabled pack? And can I welcome to our committee this afternoon Mr Declan Kearney, Junior Minister, and Mr Gary Middleton. And can I advise them that this session is being recorded by Hansard, and the video of the meeting will be available on the committee webpage. Can I invite both Junior Ministers to make a briefing to the members? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go first, and can I take this opportunity to congratulate you, first of all, on your role as Chair. I think it's the first time that we've been in front of the committee with you as Chair, so I wish you well. We obviously welcome the opportunity to update the committee on EU exit matters. We have provided you with a written brief earlier, and we hope that we will be able to provide a further update today as well. So just to begin off with the protocol and the ongoing discussions between the UK and the EU. Members will be aware that the parties continue to engage in intensive discussions to assess how far the gap in the respective positions can be bridged. Lord Frost, of course, resigned from government in December, and the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs, Liz Truss, has replaced him as the lead negotiator. In a statement issued following the phone call with EU Commission Vice President Maros Šefčovič on the 21st of December, the Foreign Secretary reiterated that her government's position on the protocol had not changed, and that their preference remains an agreed solution to the issues currently under discussion. However, triggering Article 16 remains a possibility for them. The committee will be aware that the Foreign Secretary is due to meet Vice President Šefčovič later on in the week. The committee will also be aware that progress has been made in seeking agreement on medicines, with the EU announcement on the 17th of December that it will begin taking unilateral action to ensure that continued supply of medicines to Northern Ireland. And the current grace period has been extended until the end of 2022, unless legislative arrangements can be put in place sooner than that. The EU itself has not yet published the legislative details of their solution, and of course, given the complexity of the issues involved, detailed analysis will be required to ascertain if the proposals will ensure that it's a long-term, stable solution for our medicines supply. The civil service officials will continue to engage with their colleagues in relevant Whitehall departments to gain the clarity required on these proposals and the other issues currently being discussed from the EU non-papers. As you're aware, the 5 parties in the executive have differing opinions on the status of the protocol, including whether or not Article 16 should be triggered. However, we are agreed on the need for long-term and workable solutions for our citizens and our businesses, which of course cause the least disruption to all of our communities and provide our businesses with the certainty they need, not only to plan ahead but also to invest and to grow and to maintain their competitiveness as we emerge from the COVID pandemic. So on that end, we'll continue to communicate all of our positions to the European Union and the UK government as we continue to monitor the progress of the discussions departments have commenced work to understand what might be required in the event of a solution not being reached. The committee is well aware that as a result of the EU exit and the continued operation of the protocol, there is an increased likelihood of policy divergence between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. It will not be possible to assess the impact of that divergence or any divergence driven by these regulatory changes until we see the full detail, which we do not yet have. To minimise and mitigate any potential negative impact of divergence, the Executive Office officials are engaging with colleagues in the Cabinet Office and other Whitehall departments to ensure that consideration of the impact divergence could have on our businesses and economy is taken into account at the very earliest stage through the policy development and regulatory processes. Officials also remain appraised of potential divergence driven by changes to EU legislation via attendance of the UK-EU Joint Consultative Working Group and the development of an IT system to monitor and track changes to legislation which will fall under the remit of the protocol. The impacts of divergence are potentially broad and cross-cutting, and TEO officials have established a monthly cross-departmental working group to scope and monitor potential impacts and identify appropriate actions where necessary. I'm now going to pass over to Junior Minister Kearney.
Thanks, Gary. Agus bliain uair faoi waise Dave go léir, and you're very welcome to take up your new position, Sinead, as Chair of the Committee, and we look forward to working with you for the remainder of this mandate. The continued implementation and operation of the Withdrawal Agreement, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and other trade agreements will govern our future relationship with the European Union and the rest of the world, and eventually become business as usual, with consequential bilateral liaison between relevant Whitehall departments and officials here. To ensure the Executive is fully appraised of any key developments in this context, TEO will continue to provide central oversight and coordination via the Interdepartmental Steering Group, which Gary has just referenced. Membership of the group continues to include a senior representative from each civil service department. That ensures a consistent and a joined-up approach, and it enables departments to share knowledge and expertise on cross-cutting issues and information from key counterparts in Whitehall, the Irish Government, and other devolved administrations, as well as our own representatives in Brussels, China, and Washington. The Interdepartmental Steering Group also routinely considers a forward work programme which looks at priorities for executive consideration. Representatives from lead civil service departments continue to engage with Whitehall counterparts on the implementation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And all of the specialised committees established within the TCA governance structures have now met, following a meeting of the Specialised Committee on Participation in Union Programmes on the 21st of December last. Progress has also been made by the British Government and the EU in the establishment of the Parliamentary Partnership Assembly. The TCA also provides for engagement with civic society on the implementation of the agreement through the creation of a domestic advisory group and a civil society forum. An expression of interest exercise for membership of both was undertaken by the British Government between October and November last year. Civil service officials engaged with the British Cabinet Office to promote local interests in that process, and through liaison with TEO, executive departments, shared information on the civic society mechanisms with their stakeholders to encourage a broad range of representation from here on both groups. British Government officials have advised that applicants to the groups will be advised of the outcome as soon as is practicable. On common frameworks, work continues on the publication of the remaining common frameworks during December and this month, allowing the scrutiny process by relevant departmental committees to begin. And we continue to engage with the British Government and other devolved administrations on the EU settlement scheme to ensure that the rights of all EEA citizens resident here are fully protected. On the 20th of December, the joint First Ministers and their counterparts from the administrations in Scotland and Wales wrote to Kevin Foster, the Minister for Safe and Legal Migration, to highlight their continued concern that EEA citizens have to rely on digital-only proof, which indirectly discriminates against those vulnerable citizens who may struggle to prove their status. The letter follows the British Home Office's decision not to provide a physical means of proof, as requested in an initial letter sent to Minister Foster in November. We're also aware of the concerns arising from the provisions in the Nationality and Borders Bill, where non-Irish EU nationals will require an electronic travel authorisation to travel here from the south. Our officials sought urgent clarification on this matter, and the British Home Office advised that there will not be routine controls on journeys within the common travel area and no immigration controls whatsoever on the land border with the 26 counties. Finally, I would highlight that the British Government have recently launched a consultation on their proposals to reform the Human Rights Act 1998 with a Bill of Rights. We've received assurances that rights obligations under Article 2 of the Protocol and the Good Friday Agreement will continue to be met, and we hope that this provides you with a useful update on EU exit matters.
Thank you very much, Ministers, for that update. Can I ask, I have several of questions along as my arm to ask, to be honest with you, but just on the issue of medicines, what are your thoughts on the proposals around the solutions to medicines, and how are you dealing with the fact that they do not include veterinary medicines?
Well, thanks, Chair. I'd maybe just come in initially. Obviously, in my remarks, I touched on the issue of medicines and the fact that there was a proposal outlined in the EU non-paper, albeit whilst it's a step forward, there were concerns just around the lack of detail. And I know that given the complexity of the medicines issue, I know it has been raised particularly in relation to labelling, for example, from GB and how that will play out in Northern Ireland. And I know that, given the complexities of the issues, analysis of the details still continues in relation to that. And we know that all of the issues which have been brought forward in the EU non-paper, or indeed the command paper from the UK government, are very much a basis for discussion. And what we've been doing is highlighting, and you've highlighted one area of medicines, and that's been the veterinary issue. And I know that the Department for Agriculture has raised that issue as well. So, we give a cautious, well, certainly I give a cautious welcome to the fact that a resolution has been worked upon, but it's simply just that at this minute in time, it's an idea and it's a thought process. We need to see that being put into some sort of formal long-term solution that will ensure that we've complete equity in terms of access to medicines right across these islands.
Thank you, Minister. And I think that we have made definitely great inroads in relation to the issue of medicines. I'm certainly more comfortable now than I was a few months back. Gary, you raised the issue about the Agriculture Minister. I suppose in a lot of ways we hear a lot of information through the media, and we are hearing media reports that the Agriculture Minister intends to bring the implementation of the protocol to the Executive. Surely this is a matter of implementing the UK's international commitments. Can you give me a view on that? And perhaps Junior Minister Kearney can give me a view as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And obviously I can give you a view, albeit we're here to discuss issues on behalf of the Executive Office, so I can't speak on behalf of the Minister for Agriculture. But it is clear that, speak from a party political perspective, that we do have concerns about agreements that have been made in the past, particularly around New Decade, New Approach, and the need to ensure unfettered access within the internal market of the United Kingdom. I think that questions have been raised in terms of the legality, the processes, whether executive approval has been will be required or not in terms of progressing with the individual checks. We know that the Department for Infrastructure or for Agriculture, apologies, has taken particular steps in terms of addressing issues around pets, for example, and pet passports, and how we ensure that animals and pets can be moved to Northern Ireland or to GB and back to Northern Ireland without those checks. So steps have been taken unilaterally by the Minister for Agriculture. We haven't yet had an executive meeting where such issues will be discussed, but no doubt they will in the very near future. So I don't want to preempt anything that the Minister for Agriculture will do, other than, of course, what we're hearing in the media. And I think it's fair to say that everything we hear in the media is not always accurate.
Thanks, Sinead. Yes, I'll come in on that point, but if I could pick up briefly on your question around medicines. I think the real significance of the initiative that has been taken by the European Commission rests in the fact that they have offered to take very decisive and substantial action in relation to an issue that was causing, understandably, a considerable amount of alarm. I think we can be very reassured that there is an absolute commitment on behalf of the European Commission, as articulated by Maros Šefčovič himself on several occasions, repeated by Ursula von der Leyen, and then since then, Maria McGuinness, that there will be no effort spared to ensure that we have full and complete access to medicine supplies, that there will be no disruption to access to all forms of medicines, including important cancer medicines for citizens here in the north. And I think that indicates a very clear resolution on behalf of the European Commission to find a way through this impasse. And I think that they now need to be met with the same spirit and resolve by the British government to ensure that these vexed issues that have cast a shadow over the implementation of the protocol and politics more generally here in the north for over 12 months now are in fact resolved, put to the side, and allow us to move on. And by addressing the other issues of friction around the protocol, we move on with a smooth implementation of all of its elements. The whole issue of medicines is bound up in a very complex way with European legislation. And I think if the European Commission are saying that they can resolve a matter of such complexity to the satisfaction of citizens here, it doesn't just demonstrate good faith, but I think it indicates that there is nothing within this impasse that is beyond resolution, if in fact the good faith exists to find solutions and to ensure that we have an effective and a smooth implementation of the protocol so that everyone can benefit from its inherent advantages for local businesses here in the north. On the other issue that you have that you've raised, the executive has a legal obligation in relation to these matters as they apply to ourselves here in the north. There is a requirement for border control posts to be put in place to create the necessary infrastructure to ensure that, for example, the offer that the European Commission have made to reduce SPS checks by as much as 80%, to enable customs checks to be carried through with a reduction of as much as 50%, that infrastructure is in place so that all of that can be smoothly progressed. Gary's right in saying that we've heard a lot of media commentary around this issue. However, some of that media commentary has been made by the Minister of Agriculture himself. But I think that the committee can be reassured that no documentation, no paper will be brought before the Executive Committee, because as all members know, all paperwork, all proposals and documentation coming from individual ministers passes through the Executive Office for clearance before being tabled on the agenda. But I think you can be reassured that the Executive Office will not allow and will resist any type of proposals being brought forward that potentially would put the Executive Committee as a whole in a situation where it would be out with its legal obligations under the protocol and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement as it applies here in the North.
That's welcome news. I think, you know, from all parties' perspective, we have to be very cognizant of the instability that these type of issues give to our business community, and we need to put them first in these circumstances. And I'm very well aware of the responsibilities and duties of our civil servants, and to put them in that position as well is really regrettable. So thank you for that. Just a quick one here in relation to, and this is for both ministers. You'll be aware that the House of Lords European Affairs Subcommittee on the protocol has written to the UK Government in relation to the democratic deficit created by the protocol, and we have received a significant 10-page correspondence from Lord Jay in our papers today. But what plans have you made in relation for direct engagement by the Executive and the Assembly with decision makers within the EU and the UK Government, and also the engagement between the Executive and the Assembly and the EU institutions, and also the formal arrangements between the Executive, civil society, Northern Ireland around the protocol and Trade and Cooperation Agreement, because this is a really fundamental part of the arrangements here in Northern Ireland. And I don't think we spend an awful lot of time talking about the barriers, but where is the decision making and the process and the transparency and the governance around this? Because I think this would settle an awful lot of the issues if we knew that there was a voice, and a voice that was listened to at the heart of this decision making process. So where are your department with all progressing all of these areas to address the democratic deficit?
I think you have received correspondence, Sinead, from the department, from TEO, in relation to the issues of participation in the committees which I spoke of in my opening remarks. And our officials are very closely engaged through the relevant structures to ensure that we do see proper representation, proportionate representation from our business and our civic society organisations here in the North, so that our voice is heard on its own behalf. It's been a consistent position, notwithstanding differences around the Executive Committee table and within TEO on this issue. It's been a consistent position shared, I think, by all ministers, that we speak best for ourselves, that our local businesses speak best for themselves, and that civic society should be given its opportunity to express its opinion on how all of these issues impact on society here in the North, and what we want to see done by both the British Government and the European Commission in the future to ensure that our voices are not just heard, but that we are influential in that respect. I think it's significant that the Shannon Special Select Committee on the withdrawal issue, the EU withdrawal issue, which was published, its report, which was published in December, has brought forward some interesting and innovative ideas to ensure that the North continues to have a voice, and a voice well heard in the European Commission. So there are both specific formal proposals for how our parties, for how the Executive Committee and the Assembly should be included in the processes of engagement around oversight of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. But I think that there are other options which would bring further additional value to ensuring that our perspective and our experience and particularly the ideas of our business community are integrated within the architecture of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and how the protocol itself is implemented in the time ahead. And my last point would be that it's essential that there is more and not less direct engagement between MLAs, between our executive departments and and TEO itself with the European Commission. That's why I think the ongoing engagement by Maroš Šefčovič, both with the joint First Ministers and with all of the parties, is very important, and why it's essential that we continue to see more direct engagement from both the European Union ambassador based in London, here in the north, and also by some of the significant members of the European Parliament who have visited here in the course of recent months and weeks. And I include within that number Bernd Lang and David McAllister, two of the most prominent MEPs with responsibility for the Foreign Relations Committee and also for the International Trade Committee in the European Parliament. So much more of that to both formally and informally ensure that our concerns and our views are properly taken on board.
Chair, I suppose just to add to that, each of the ministers around the table, not least Declan and I, have endeavoured at every opportunity at all of the meetings in relation to EU exit, whether it be with the EU and the UK or UK on their own, to raise all of the issues which not only have been raised within your committee, but raised directly with us, of course, as elected representatives as well. As Declan has said, a letter is issued to yourself, to the committee. I think it went today, actually, just in terms of a more detailed update and where that sort of civic engagement piece is at. I think in reference to your point, you seem to be highlighting more of sort of the elected members and how we can input. Well, we continue to have that input in our elected offices as ministers, and we'll continue to do that. Of course, it's going to be vital, especially in terms of engagement over the next number of weeks around divergence issues, issues of state aid, which I know have been raised in the past, but also issues of funding as well. It is important that as local elected representatives, but indeed as ministers, that we have as much input as possible. So there's agreement there, I think, right across the executive that more engagement is obviously beneficial, and we always welcome, whether it be Vice President Šefčovič or the Foreign Secretary or any minister or House of Lords or any representative engaging directly with us. And it has been welcome, particularly over the last number of months, the amount of countries and ambassadors who have come to Northern Ireland to hear directly from us in terms of the issues that we have and how we see the future and how we see us coming out of the issues that we currently face. So hopefully that's some help. But as I say, the letter has been issued to yourselves today with a lot more detail on it in terms of the engagement piece.
Thank you very much, Junior Ministers, for that. And I think Norway, the precedent has been set for engagement as well. Norway has a very structured approach to engagement with the EU in the area of lawmaking and the processes. So there are examples there of good practice. So we're not for an absolutely new field in that area. Can I pass over now to Deputy Chair for questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Middleton, Minister Kearney, Happy New Year, and thank you for your presentation and questions so far. Listening to the radio this morning, business organisations reported what they described as a very productive and positive meeting with Liz Truss and her team yesterday. And they felt from her feedback that things were going well and progressing in the right direction. I'm just wondering what engagement your department has had with her and her team since she took over from Lord Frost, and if you've any indications on which areas are going well as reported, where the stumbling blocks remain, and what estimated time frame, if any, she and her team are indicating will remain for the ongoing negotiations.
Well, thanks, John. Obviously, there's a lot in the questions that you've asked, but I think that it is welcome that the business community continue to be heard, and I think it is positive if they're saying that the soundings are positive. The First and Deputy First Minister haven't yet had an opportunity to meet with the Foreign Secretary at this minute in time, and no doubt that will happen in the future. I know that certainly at a political level, party leaders have met. Obviously, there's various versions of the meetings that they have had. I think that what we need to see and what we've been pushing for is a time frame. What we don't want is endless negotiations. Of course, at the outset of this, we were told that the protocol was not up for negotiation, that there could be no changes. I very much welcome the fact that we're now seeing changes, particularly when it comes to medicines, but we know that there's other areas which need to be addressed. And they are no doubt part of the discussions. What we know, and certainly what I have seen in terms of the EU non-papers and the UK command paper, is that there's significant gaps. That being said, that progress has no doubt been made, especially in terms of the announcements around that medicine piece, as I've said. The difficulty being is that we haven't a direct line of communication in terms of into those specific negotiations. Our members of the executive office, our team, continue to be in all of the calls through the various committees. But again, they're giving their views, they're giving their voice, but ultimately the decision will be one between the UK and the EU. But we have been clear, this can't go on forever, can't be endless. It needs to have an end point, and we need to see the resolution and the negotiations come to an end in a satisfactory way that all of us can then move on and try and bring stability for our businesses and for all of our communities as well.
Thanks, Gary. I don't know if Declan wants to come in or...
Yeah, I'll come in briefly on that, John.
Sure.
Thanks. And yeah, I mean, it's a useful question to pose, John. I spoke with some of the business leaders who took part in that meeting. I think it was quite short, but Liz Truss did say and repeated this in a meeting with the Sinn Féin leadership that she has no desire to trigger Article 16, that she wants to approach the meetings with Maros Šefčovič on Thursday in a constructive way with a view to bringing this impasse to an end. In my earlier comments, I indicated my own view. I believe that's possible. I see nothing insurmountable in relation to dealing with these issues. The reason that we're in the bind we are in is essentially to do with the approach driven by David Frost, which finds its origins in his approach to all of these issues going back to 2017. And he set it out very clearly in his contribution to the Policy Exchange Journal a matter of weeks and months ago. And we're really now living with the legacy of that intransigence, a very ideological approach being taken to these issues. I think it's important to say that the protocol and how we manage the new trading realities that arise from Brexit are not ideological issues. They are economic issues, so they need to be approached pragmatically. For as long as there is a shadow hanging over our economy and our political process as a result of not bringing these matters to a conclusion, then that creates uncertainty for local businesses and it confuses the picture. And if there is a political will, if Liz Truss is now prepared to bring a new attitude to the remaining discussions with the European Commission, then I think we can cut through those issues, find the landing zones, build on the momentum that has been delivered by the European Commission to date. The difficulty we have is that while we've seen the shape of the European Commission's proposals across all of the relevant issues, whether that's customs, SPS, in relation to medicines, governance issues, we have yet to see the British government's proposals. And to that extent, then we all remain blindsided. And to echo a point made by Gary, the reality is that the British government has not, in any democratic or inclusive way, allowed our own executive to be involved in these discussions. Now, that's why it's so important that we are relentless in the pressure that we bring to both the British Government and also the European Commission to ensure that that's not an impediment to ensuring that final solutions are arrived at. But nothing's going to change in relation to all of this unless matters are approached honestly, and therefore it's my hope that Liz Truss will be good to her word, that she will not implement Article 16. Because in reality, and there's a huge fiction surrounding the triggering of Article 16, Article 16, if it is triggered, will not make one bit of difference to the current situation. It will be time bound. It can only be used in an agreed basis, and then it must be reviewed after a period of time. So this notion that Article 16 and the threat of it and all of the surrounding sabre rattling is in some way going to bring about a panacea and magically transform the situation is frankly nonsense. It should be dispensed with as reckless rhetoric, and we should encourage both the British Government and the European Commission to get on with the real business of closing out these remaining matters of disagreement and then allowing our economy to function successfully with successful access to both the British single market and the European single market simultaneously.
Okay, thanks, Declan. That leads me on, I suppose, to my next point. And while I think we all agree we want these talks to conclude fruitfully, with a conclusion for everyone that works for everybody as quickly as possible, and taking on board even what Liz Truss says, Article 16 does still remain on the table as a possibility, and I take what you say about the impact it could have. I'm just wondering, in terms of contingency planning, what has the Executive Office or the other offices within the Executive done to plan for what the impacts of Article 16, should it be triggered, on those departments? If you could just talk me through any plans within that and the impact that might have.
Well, briefly on that point, John, in some respects, this is the stuff of unknown unknowns. Okay. We already are living with a considerable amount of uncertainty for local businesses, and that is bringing with it its own destabilising consequences. That said, businesses are getting on with doing what they best, finding solutions to problems, and they have not been held back in their efforts to continue to be productive, profitable, and to open up alternative routes, supply chains, and to establish workarounds for the difficulties arising from some of the disruption that we currently face. I mentioned earlier the existence of the Interdepartmental Working Group. We repeatedly raise with our officials the status of contingency planning. We've done that since the beginning of the year. Contingency planning, horizon scanning is an ongoing piece of work, but in many respects, our officials are hampered by dint of the fact that they are not being allowed to become directly involved in the technical discussions that are taking place between the European Commission and the British Government. And then there is a genuine level of uncertainty as to what in fact would be the immediate consequence flowing from the impact of triggering Article 16. But I can assure you that on an ongoing basis, the Interdepartmental Working Group, engaging with all of the relevant personnel across the executive departments, are looking at horizon scanning processes, looking at Article 16, anticipating situations, and then ensuring that we're as match fit as we can be to deal with whatever emerges, be that positive or a negative, in the short to mid-term.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add, I suppose, just briefly to that, John, and thank you for that question. The officials do, continue to assess, the potential impacts, and it's something which the Intergovernmental Working Group is indeed looking at, and we're all cognizant of. I do think that obviously the preference for all of us should be that there can be an agreement and there can be a resolution. I think the fact that proposals have been put on the table in relation to the SPS checks from the EU, albeit as far as I see it, is nowhere near far enough. But I think if in one fell swoop they can propose an 80% reduction in SPS checks, then of course many of us and businesses will beg the question, well, why the need for that in the first place? These negotiations need to be brought to a conclusion, a timely conclusion. In the event of Article 16 being triggered, Declan's absolutely right. That in itself will be time bound, but the time that is there needs to be used wisely. The government must legislate for unfettered access on east-west, west-east spaces, and we need to ensure that the links there are no longer broken and that they're restored and brought back together. That being said, I think all of us are hopeful and we want to see a resolution, albeit time-bound, but I just want to assure you that officials are there. They are very much aware that this is a potential issue coming at us quickly, and they continue to assess what potential impact will be for our businesses and our communities here in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thanks for that. One very brief one, Chair, if I may. Gents, the Joint Committee hasn't met since June 2021, as you're probably aware. Appreciate there's ongoing negotiations, but I'm just wondering, given what the chairs already discussed about the democratic deficit, what you have both pointed out about the need for civic society and business to feed into that and for the problems to be aired, surely that's the place for this to be done. And it sort of brings into question the effectiveness of the committee if it's not meeting for the guts of 7 or 8 months. I'm just wondering if you could give us a comment on that and if you know when it's next planned to meet.
The difficulty, John, is that the Joint Committee requires to be jointly convened. And David Frost and the British government have refused to do that. I've raised this matter directly with David Frost over the course of recent months, and I'm on the public record myself calling for the Joint Committee to be established. All of these are issues that need to be resolved within the joint framework of the protocol. The Joint Committee is the mechanism that exists to ensure that these kind of difficulties are successfully ironed out and that we then build on progress going forward. The last meeting, you correctly point out, was in June. I would urge that Liz Frost now, as a confidence-building measure to both our political process, all of the parties in the executive, and also to our business community and civil society, would now break with the refusal of David Frost to convene a meeting of the Joint Committee, and this Thursday engage directly with Maros Šefčovič in order that an announcement can and should be made that following on from that engagement we will now see a meeting of the Joint Committee. That's the way to go. That's the way to deal with these issues, and it is essential now, in my view, to assist in breaking this impasse that the Joint Committee is convened. Okay,
thanks for that. Appreciate your time both today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Emma Sheeran into the spotlight, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to wish everybody a happy new year in the first meeting of 2022 and thank both junior ministers for their presentation and questions answered thus far. I have a question around some of the funding that we have lost in the North as a consequence of Brexit, specifically around the European Social Fund. I've had correspondence over the past weeks from a local organisation that I'm very familiar with in my own home parish of Ballinascreen, the Workspace Group, who do a lot of vital work on the ground, working with local businesses and voluntary organisations, bringing people into employment, and have brought people through various programmes and seen massive success rates with that, and sort of operate as a part of their remit as a social enterprise, and the work that they do is key. And they've sort of got two problems at the minute, whereby the 1 year extension to the European Social Fund hasn't been able to be accessed thus far because the match funding, the majority of which has previously came from the Department of Economy, hasn't been provided yet, and there's a lack of clarity as to whether or not that is going to be delivered, and that's the sort of priority at the minute. And then going forward, no understanding of what the British promised replacement fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund, is going to look like in terms of replacing the ESF, which themselves and upwards of 60 organisations across the north have relied on previously. And I suppose just the impact that this is going to have on rural communities like, you know, my own in South Derry, but across the north, places that depend on this European money. And we know the amount of funds that we're losing as a result of Brexit. So just wanted to ask what conversations there have been around that replacement going forward, or what detail we've received from the British government about what we're going to see going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma, for that question. Hopefully you will have received, just on Monday, we issued a letter to the committee, or certainly a detailed briefing in relation to the replacement EU funding. I know that was something that the committee had requested in the past, so I don't maybe just propose to go through exactly line for line, but what I would say is that it's a very valid question that you raise, and certainly if there's anything we can do in terms of the individual case and individual departments, I'm happy for you to contact us and write to us, and we're happy to do that, or certainly we'll take it forward. In terms of, so you raised specifically the issue around the European Social Fund. So I think in terms of the paper, it did say that on average we received £70 million per annum from the ESF. And in terms of the Shared Prosperity Fund from the UK government and the Community Renewal Fund, just last year we received 12.6 million. So I think there's a recognition that, you know, obviously that's less than 70 million. So there is a loss there. Obviously, you'll appreciate that that fund itself's been delivered directly by Whitehall. So first thing, we need to ensure that we continue to have a clear input into the spending power, of course, that we would have had, but also ensuring that it lines up with the priorities that we have within our particular communities, and also ensuring that, you know, we need to ascertain, of course, the SPF was a pilot and is a pilot fund. We need to ensure that, you know, that we're maximising that. So we have to get to the bottom of why, you know, 12.5 million or 12.6 million. We need to ensure that we get our fair share of the money that's available. So that's a breakdown. As I say, there's a detailed paper that we have provided in terms of the ins and outs of specifics and, you know, the Shared Prosperity Fund and exactly what that entails and on a 3-year basis. But hopefully that goes some way to answering your question.
Yeah, and following on from that, Emma, if I can just say this, I'm familiar with Workspace. They've played an indispensable role in the development and expansion of the local economy across Mid-Ulster. Played a hugely important role, as you say. And Workspace, unfortunately, is typical of the kind of casualties that we are now going to see emerge as a direct result of the decisions being made by this particular British administration and the reckless way that they have withdrawn from Europe and effectively then cut their own and our throats in terms of access to the type of funding that our regional economy has relied upon so heavily. Gary has cited some of the figures, some of the headline figures that apply here, but I'm very conscious if you take the Workspace example as a community economic regeneration organisation, when you consider that the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund, would have been directly responsible for assisting with entry to and staying within the labour market, reskilling within the labour market, particularly support for small and medium-sized enterprises, then to learn that we are going to lose, and this is established as a result of the analysis by our officials, up to £69 million. That's going to be the hit to our block grant. That's going to be the hit to the budget. That has serious repercussions for organisations such as Workspace and for other small and medium-sized enterprises right across the north in both urban and rural areas. But if you add to that, if you add to the loss of leader from within the Rural Development Programme, then you're looking at a total loss of in the region of £70 million sterling. And those are significant hits that I think we need to realise are direct consequences of the madness of leaving Europe and how this particular British government is handling the whole process of withdrawal.
Okay. Can I bring Pat Sheehan into the spotlight, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, it sounds as if Emma's connection has dropped off or something, but in any event, I'll carry on. Just in terms of the context in which we're in at the minute, on the one hand, we have seen the significant proposals from Maros Šefčovič and the EU Commission in regard to medicines, the suggestion that SPS checks would be cut by 80% and customs checks by 50%, which is all very welcome. On the other hand, we have Liz Truss has taken over from David Frost, and on the face of it, the British government policy appears to be the same. There still appears to be that same belligerence from the British government towards the EU. And here we have the threats from the DUP to pull down the institutions over the protocol. Now, according to all the polls here, the overwhelming majority of businesses are supportive of the protocol. And the one thing they need and want more than anything is certainty. But the British government belligerence and the threats from the DUP are undermining any possibility of providing certainty for businesses as we move forward. How do we resolve those issues? Thanks.
Thanks, Pat, for your question. Obviously, it's a political one, so I'll more than likely be responding in a political fashion. I do obviously hear a lot of the commentary in the media, and of course, there's a lot of polls that are rolled out now and again, and some of them, of course, will be factual, and some of them will be questionable. But whatever about that, I think all of us accept that there are businesses who are doing well at the moment, and there are businesses who are been severely damaged. There's a recognition that that's the case by, and you've highlighted the EU non-papers where they've come out and said, look, let's reduce SBS checks from one fell swoop by 80%. There's a recognition that those checks are doing harm, and our businesses have been continuing to raise those very issues, not just with the UK government, but with the European Union as well. So there's a welcome movement, but for us, it's nowhere near far enough. In terms of the stability, of course, we want to see political stability as well. We want to see economic stability and stability just within society in general. And the protocol, of course, is causing serious harm, not just in terms of, in our view, in terms of the constitutional position within the United Kingdom, but also in terms of the business community as well. And of course, the Road Haulage Association, for example, have been out very clearly, and they have themselves have given figures in terms of a 20% or 27% increase in their costs. So there's lots of things out there, and we can all take our particular narrative. Of course, you are coming at it from a different perspective than I am, particularly when it comes to the constitutional question. But what we all need to ensure and we agree on is that there's stability. But we will not have stability as long as the current protocol remains in place. And our party has been very clear, our party leader has been clear in terms of what it will mean if the protocol remains as it is, because it's not a sustainable position, certainly for ourselves as unionists, to allow a situation where there remains a clear border within our country. We just will not allow that to happen. That being said, the decision ultimately will be between the United Kingdom government and the European Union, and we'll do all in our power to ensure that those checks that continue to exist at this minute in time, that they're removed and they're done away with, and that our businesses can flow free between east and west and east, but also, of course, have access to our neighbours in the European Union as well.
Thanks for that, Gary. Although it's difficult to take you serious about stability when your own party leader is threatening every couple of weeks to pull the institutions down. and the Deer Minister from your own party is threatening to stop work on the border checks. So, I mean, that's a difficult circle to square, isn't it?
Well, Pat, your own party, obviously you're very familiar in terms of collapsing the institutions. We do not do this out of any selfish interest. We are trying to make it very clear to the United Kingdom government that we will not stand by and allow a commitment that has been made by them themselves that there will be unfettered access between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. We can't allow that to be trashed. Of course we're going to take action, and people expect us to take action on that basis. That being said, that's not where we want to be. Where we want to be is in a position that the protocol has been dealt with, and we have a place where our businesses are not at a disadvantage to the rest of the United Kingdom. We've just seen some of the reports, like just today actually, I've been contacted. It may be minor in terms of the grand scheme of things, but it's not minor to the particular businesses that are affected. Tattoo artists, for example, and not being able to access ink. We've heard in terms of issues around energy. For example, if the UK government take a decision to reduce VAT and energy costs, we could be left in a situation where we're disadvantaged again in comparison with the rest of the United Kingdom. That's not a sustainable position for us. Why would we place Northern Ireland at a disadvantage and not have all the benefits that the rest of the United Kingdom have? So in terms of the instability, we want stability. What's causing the instability is the fact that there has not been a recognition of the issues that have become apparent through the Northern Ireland Protocol. But what I would say, and welcoming note, and this is not to be, I suppose, smart about it, but I genuinely do welcome the fact that there has been a recognition that there are issues with the protocol, because not so long ago when I was in front of this committee, people were telling me that there's no issues, everybody's happy, we're content, we need to rigorously implement this. We're now seeing a situation where there's an acceptance that there are issues with medicines, there's an acceptance that there's an issue with bringing products in from GB, and I think that's welcome. But why not, if we all put our shoulder to the wheel, if we all sing off the one hymn sheet, let us get a resolution from the UK government and the EU that we can all live with, and we can then move on and try and ensure that Northern Ireland prospers for years to come.
Well, I don't accept what you're saying, Gary, because the joint committee was set up as a mechanism to deal with any teething problems as a result of the implementation of the protocol. So we were always happy that any difficulties would be brought to the joint committee and resolved there. So, thanks for your answer anyway, but I can't say we're going to have a meeting of minds there. Thanks. I don't know if Declan wants to come in on that as well. Thanks.
I'll come in briefly. Pat, thanks.
Sorry.
And if you don't mind, Chair, Sinead, I'm going to leave the meeting just when I finish up here. I have a meeting with other colleagues from Scotland and Wales and Whitehall to attend at 3:15, a meeting that was brought forward. But just very briefly, I think you have to situate all of this in the context of Brexit. So we have a protocol as a direct consequence of Brexit, and Brexit had no consent on the part of the majority of citizens living here in the north. And frankly, it's about time, as we move into 2022, that the DUP starts to own the consequences that have flowed from the Brexit that they championed, and the instability that has been caused, both economic and political, as a result. I actually think, Pat, none of us can be absolutely sure, but I get a sense that the DUP is actually quite conflicted and confused about this situation. It's a known fact that a number of DUP party members and supporters would have opposed Brexit in its time. And I think that increasingly people are looking askance at the approach that's been taken by the DUP to these issues. The danger is, you see, that conflicted and confused as they might be, they are in the process of walking people up to the top of the hill again, and we know what has happened on previous occasions of instability and impasse when the DUP have whipped up tensions and taken people to the top of the hill. Invariably, they leave them at the top of the hill. So none of this has anything to do with constitutional issues. To repeat the point, it's not about ideology, it's about economics. and the protocol has been weaponised for sectional, political and electoral reasons. I think that's wrong. I think it's a disservice to politics, and I also think it's a huge disservice to our business community and, in fact, to many people who would vote for the DUP from within that section of political unionism. So what to do? What needs to happen is that the play acting and the posturing needs to stop. What we need is constructive and positive leadership from all parties, and that's what must be set forth from within the Executive Committee. That's certainly what I'm committed to continue to provide on this particular issue. Let's withdraw all of the threats. Gary's right, let's work together, but let's work together positively and constructively. And on that basis, I think we can find a way forward to ensure smooth implementation of the protocol. But that should be, and I reiterate the point I made earlier, in the context of convening the Joint Committee. That is the place where these issues can be finally ironed out. My very last point is just to say this. The concerns about the consequences now flowing from Brexit around the protocol are not confined here to the north. I think it's very interesting to note that a significant opinion survey, which was carried out and published before Christmas by The Observer, is now indicating that more than 6 out of 10 voters believe that Brexit has gone badly or worse than they expected. Now, these are people living in Britain. And a year after Britain has left the EU, they are now saying that this was a bad idea and that they are feeling very, very negative repercussions as a direct result of that. It's interesting that when you go into the granular detail of that survey, only 7% of Remainers, as they would be described, think that Brexit has gone better, versus, and this is very significant, I think, 20% of those who voted to leave the EU are now saying that Brexit has gone worse for them than they originally would have expected. So I think that there are cold realities beginning to dawn, not just here in the north, about the consequences of Brexit and the impasse from the protocol, but we're seeing some cold realities and very severe headwinds beginning to glide into Britain as a direct result of the mistake of voting to leave the EU in England. If I may, Sinead, I'll drop out here if you don't mind. I think that this section of the meeting's possibly coming to a conclusion, but I'm under a time pressure. If you don't mind, I'll move on.
Okay, thank you very much, Declan. And I suppose I have to ask Junior Minister Gary Middleton, does he wish to stay? Because we have a few other members who want to ask questions. Or
no, I'm happy enough to stay on.
Happy enough to stay. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sinead. Thanks, Gary.
Sorry?
Thanks, Sinead. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Can I ask Trevor if you want to raise any questions?
Yes, I do. The questions were for Gary anyway, so thanks to Declan, but I'm sure Gary can manage perfectly well. And the question of I know Gary, you did say in the answer to the question previously that this wasn't really a matter for discussion at this committee, but the question of the border controls and the border posts. Do I not recollect that Evan Poots did this before and actually instructed his officials to stop construction? And I don't recall if he had to get executive approval for that or not. So the question now in the upcoming executive meeting, probably tomorrow, appears to be if the First and Deputy First Ministers don't agree jointly to put it on the agenda, then it can't go on the agenda and therefore it can't be discussed. And therefore Evan Poots can't unilaterally take any action, as he's threatened to do. But if I remember right, the last time this happened in a slightly different context, the only thing that stopped him was a reprimand from the UK government in the form of George Eustace. Did I say useless? Eustace. Sorry about that. I didn't mean that. And I'm sure he's a great guy. So what about it, Gary? I mean, just to have it clear, if the joint First Ministers won't allow it, both of them jointly, to allow it onto the agenda, well, then it can't be discussed. And therefore, no matter what legal advice comes from Donegal, Edwin Poots doesn't have the right to unilaterally take this action.
Yeah, well, thanks, Trevor. So the first thing, well, look, you're right in terms of your assessment of the First and Deputy First Minister. We have to agree that any item goes on the agenda, that has to be done jointly. In terms of what Minister Poots or the Agriculture Minister will do, I haven't seen nor am I privy to any legal advice that he would have. If we are to base it on what you have said in terms of if he was put forward a proposal for decision from the executive in terms of the current posts and checks which are currently in place, if in the scenario that wasn't allowed to be put on to the executive for a decision, then the question, of course, and this has been raised publicly, would be, well, if that's not the case, then approval hadn't been given and therefore it would have to be stopped. But of course, I can't comment, and you'll appreciate this, I can't comment on what legal advice Minister Poots has. We'll wait to see what paper, if any, is provided to the executive, and ultimately we will deal with it when it arises.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Gary, but does it really matter what the legal advice is, given where it's come from? That this cannot be discussed at the executive. That's my understanding, and also was Declan's understanding before he left. It can't be discussed at the executive, and therefore the executive can't endorse a decision. And on the basis of what Edwin Poots has said, this is a cross-cutting matter which a decision can only be taken if it's discussed and approved through the executive. So where are we with this? I just think we're getting two stories here,
Well, there's not going to be, of course, there's not going to be political agreement between myself and Declan or the DUP or Sinn Féin for that matter, or indeed the five parties across the executive. The point that I believe has been discussed is around the fact that because this is a cross-cutting issue, that it would require executive approval. Now, if there is an attempt to prevent that executive approval from happening by not allowing it onto the agenda, if this was to happen, then I suppose the case could be made that, well, there hasn't been approval, so therefore, they can't continue. But again, I haven't seen any legal advice, so I can't comment any further in terms of what the Agriculture Minister, will do, other than, of course, what has been said publicly. But at this minute in time, I haven't seen any papers that have been put forward to the executive.
Yeah, there's an enormous number of precedents for items quite desirable items not being allowed onto the executive agenda. And I'm thinking recently of one that was blocked by the DUP over 40 times, and in terms of welfare mitigations and the universal credit. And finally it was allowed, I think, the 42nd time. This is ridiculous stuff, but it proves my point to think that this cannot proceed. Edwin Poots has no part of anything about this unless he has executive approval, and it can't go on the agenda without the approval, effectively, of the Deputy First Minister.
Well, Trevor, I suppose without getting into areas of other departments and reasons why particular issues can't be agreed, for me, and certainly the way that I work, is that you try and come at these things in a way of cooperation. You come at them in terms of trying to get areas or items agreed in a way that obviously there's consensus, and that's how it works. So in terms of specific blocking of issues, that's sort of a term that you would use, that almost there was a disruptive nature. I think what you would find in a lot of cases is that, for it to be brought forward to the executive, you would try and have a consensus or try to get it to a position where parties can agree and get it over the line. Otherwise, as I said, it'll be stuck anyway in terms of trying to get a decision. But look, we'll wait and see what the Department for Agriculture bring forward, if anything, in the near future.
Yeah, well, I'll not chase the matter, Gary. I mean, you did mention consensus, the need for consensus. That would be a marvellous thing to have in this country at the present time. Can I just go back briefly, Chair, to the question of medicines? To me, the EU has made a generous offer to extend the present non-action until the end of this year, unless something can be agreed in the meantime. To me, that's generous. But the response from the British government has been downright surly. And Declan, before he left, said that we don't know what the British proposals are. But actually would do. The British proposal is to leave things exactly as they always have been and to use the common term unfettered access between the mainland and Northern Ireland. I want to go back to what was offered way back in this process. It seems to have been discounted or forgotten about, and that's the question of medicines and medical products, but it could be sent here on an unfettered basis from the UK, provided they were labelled only for use in Northern Ireland, not to be resold. Is that still a sticking point for one side of the Executive Office?
Well, of course, it's a sticking point for the UK and the EU governments who are taking part in the negotiations. But we do know that, and we did highlight this obviously when the question came up earlier in terms of what the EU non-paper had said in relation to medicines. I think when we engage with our own officials and as they try to assess and analyse what specifically that would mean for Northern Ireland. They brought to us and told us, look, the proposals itself from the EU will require them to amend their own legislation to include where there would be no requirement for manufacturing authorisation or import licences are needed, or indeed separate packaging. The main concern that was brought forward to us was that this is such a complex area. There hasn't been enough detail. So when we talk about bringing forward legislation, or EU bringing forward legislation that we would have no say on, we haven't seen any of that. So it's very difficult to, I suppose, analyse what it would mean. And I know it has been raised in the past by others in terms of what it would mean for medicines coming from GB into Northern Ireland in terms of those pharmaceutical companies, whether or not they would even buy into it is another question. But until we see the detail, and I know that particular political opinions have given the view that somehow the EU have been so flexible in all of this. But I would argue that it's not about flexibility. I think that they've been brought to the point where they've had to take action because the impact has been so great that there's no other option but to take action and to try and address the issues that have been brought before us.
Yes, but on the specific point of labelling products only for resale and use in Northern Ireland, is that such a big sticking point as it sometimes sounds? I'm not talking particularly about the DUP. I should rephrase that. It's a UK objection. And now you seem to be blaming the pharmaceutical companies. Presumably that would be another cost to them to stick a small label on every product. I don't see it that way, and I think the EU has been far more flexible in this than the British government has. Or on this and many other topics, but in this particular one, they seem to have offered so much and got so little response.
Well, with all due respect, Trevor, you may not see it as an issue, but I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies, and we know that they themselves have raised issues around costs. And, unless you can tell me a figure, I certainly can't give you a figure in terms of what it will mean for them, because we just don't know. The basis of the non-paper, the basis of the command paper were a basis for discussion. And until we see a resolution or until we see a form of agreement, we can't with any certainty say what the impact would be to those businesses or whether or not they would even take that on board. Of course, as a unionist, I want to see no difference whatsoever between somebody living in England accessing medication and somebody living in Northern Ireland accessing medication, because there shouldn't be a difference. So we will come at it from the basis that anything or any agreement or any decision that's been brought forward needs to be ensuring that there's equitable treatment. Why should somebody with cancer in Northern Ireland be treated any differently than somebody with cancer in the rest of GB? And so I think if we just boil it down to just an issue of a label on a package, I don't think it's as simple as that. It's clear that the proposals from the EU in terms of their non-paper will require legislation. We will not have, obviously, a say because we don't have a democratic say in terms of what the EU bring forward in terms of legislation, but we haven't seen that, so we can't give any definitive answer as to what it will entail.
Yeah, well, again, on that pursuit, I really can't see the difference in treatment of somebody with cancer in the UK as opposed to somebody with cancer in Northern Ireland, if the only difference is a small label on a particular product, which probably costs a fraction of a penny. But there we are.
Well, the difference, Trevor, of course, is in terms of access to the medicine, because if medicines are approved quicker in the United Kingdom than they are in the EU, then there will be a difference in terms of access. So it's not just specifically in relation to an issue around the label, it's also an issue in relation to access to medicines that will be possibly pushed through the United Kingdom health assessment processes quicker than they would do within the EU. So it will be an issue in terms of access as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Pádraig Delargy into the spotlight, please? Thank you.
Last one.
Chair, can you hear me okay?
The last, yeah.
Yep.
Yes,
Yes.
I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to start by wishing everyone a happy 2023, a happy new year. I was particularly delighted to start my 2022 hearing Gary mention that he opposes British borders. We've been opposing a British border in Ireland for 100 years, so maybe we have more in common than we think. Just to move on to my question then, Gary, obviously in recent days, the Agriculture Minister, Edmund Poots, has been preparing the paper to bring to the executive around check supports. I have met with a number of businesses in dairy, as I'm sure you have as well, who have been telling us time and time again that they need certainty to support their businesses, that they need stability. Do you not think that the rationale behind this just creates more uncertainty, just impacts on local businesses at a time when it has already been such a difficult situation for them? Do you not feel that we should be in the position to be shoring up businesses and seeing what we can do to help and support them?
Well, thanks, Padraig, and I suppose it's remiss of me not to wish everybody a happy new year as well. I'm glad that you took comfort in my comments. Obviously, you may have interpreted them slightly different than how I wanted to portray them, but nonetheless, in relation to, again, I suppose I can't get into specifics in terms of what the intentions of the Agriculture Minister would be, but what I would say is that, we come at this from a point of view that we want to see ease of access for businesses. So anything that we can do to reduce checks, to do away with checks, to ensure that there's an ease of access in terms of supply from GB, then of course that's the action that we plan to take. Now, we would argue that that is about ensuring certainty for businesses, because businesses raise with us, and I'm sure, and you're right, look, and they raise with you as well, that there are issues that continue to exist with the Northern Ireland Protocol. I also recognise that there are others who don't have any issues. I recognise that, but we also have to deal with the reality that others and a lot of businesses are suffering at this minute in time. Hence the reason why we believe that a negotiation between the UK and EU needs to be a favourable one, that the checks need to be reduced and they need to be done away with, in fact, but the reduction is a starting point. So I don't think what you're saying is you want stability for Northern Ireland businesses, and so do I, but I see it in a fashion that we need to do away with the checks that exist east-west, west-east, and we need to ensure that unfettered access, which of course you, I and all of the people around the table signed up to in the New Decade New Approach.
Well, I would say, from having met with quite a few businesses, particularly over the Christmas and into the January period, they have said that this will just create further uncertainty, that this in the longer term, in the short, medium and long term, is not creating any stability for them. It just creates a pattern of instability and more uncertainty for them, Gary. So I think, it would be useful for you to perhaps have those conversations with businesses in the area. I'm very happy to put you in touch with them and for them to relay those concerns to you, because the overwhelming opinion that I have been getting, I actually haven't had one business that has said to me that this is going to create any more stability. This is in any way going to benefit their business. So I would have to disagree with you on the basis of the evidence that I have collated throughout our shared constituency.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not doubting what you're saying in terms of the particular businesses you've been speaking to. What I find is that those businesses who have said that the impact on them has been minimal, it's not a case of that they're in favour of the protocol. The reality is they're just trying to live with it. that's not a position that I'm content to live with in terms of the constituency that we represent. Of course, when I'm, obviously speaking on behalf of the Executive Office, it's a Northern Ireland-wide basis, so maybe, I get a perspective that's obviously wider than just one particular constituency. But I do hear it on a day and daily basis, and I've used the example of, an access to ink for tattoo artists, not something that's particularly going to affect me, but it does affect businesses, whether it be the medicine issue or whether it be pets or pet passports or animals. We're dealing at the minute with a situation where we currently have grace periods in place. If you foresee a situation, so businesses, while some of them are living with the reality at this minute in time of what we're dealing with in relation to the protocol, if there's no agreement, or if there is an agreement which is not satisfactory and which continues on in the fashion that we have this minute in time, that's not something that's sustainable in the long term. If we were to take the advice of some political parties who were quite content to implement the protocol radically and rigorously initially, we wouldn't be in a position now where the EU are coming out and saying, well, let's do away with 80% of the checks in one fell swoop. So we've managed to bring the UK government and the EU back to the table. Despite all of the odds, they're now listening. Let's hope that they can turn what are words into action. And I hope that that's something that can be done in the very near future. We don't need to drag this on endlessly.
Okay, so just one final point on that. Are you in agreement with me? I think I picked up from your comments that you might be. That the majority of businesses in our constituency in Derry are opposed to Edwin Pitt's proposals.
Well, no, because in terms of what Edwin Pitt's proposals are, what we hear in the media in terms of discussions, I haven't had any discussions whatsoever, or certainly people haven't came to me specifically on concerns about doing away with checks. I don't see why any business would be advocating for more checks. I don't see how that's something that's sustainable. I think the majority of businesses would recognise that whatever can be done to make life easier for them, to ensure that they have access to the supply chains that the rest of the United Kingdom have, that's a positive, that's a good thing. What they don't like, and what businesses do raise with me, and I do be speaking to businesses day in, day out, they don't like political instability, they don't like the economic instability, but also the fact that so many people within our society are annoyed about what's happening, whether it be in terms of their own access when they go to purchase products, for example. Those issues need to be dealt with. So when they raise issues with me, it's about the concern about how we're going to address those particular issues of stability. And the onus is on all of us to try and get a resolution, and that's what we're working towards. But if that doesn't happen, of course, then other action will have to be taken.
Do you think that Jeffrey Donaldson's comments and recent media appearances have promoted stability?
Well, I think what it has done is it has ensured that the UK government and the EU recognise that a lot of people in Northern Ireland, and certainly when it comes to the Assembly in terms of unionism, not one elected representative supports the position that we currently have in relation to the protocol. So it has, I suppose, wakened up the United Kingdom government, it has wakened up the European Union, and we have seen movement in relation to some of the issues, but it hasn't been enough. But what we've been saying is we want devolution to work. For 3 years when your own party brought it down, we were calling for the restoration of the Assembly. I wanted to be in there, and I still want to be in there because I recognise that Northern Ireland is best served by locally elected representatives. That being said, it's not a sustainable position, certainly for me as a unionist politician, to allow a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. And it's not, even in terms of, take aside the constitutional question, the fact that it actually is going to discriminate against people, whether it be decisions around energy prices, whether it be decisions around access to medications that have been approved in the rest of the GB that we can't access, those are issues that we can't stand over. And I don't think any political party or any elected representatives should be advocating for that.
Sorry, Pádraig, I'm going to have to cut you off there. Can I bring in Alex Easton into the spotlight, please? Thank you.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for your presentation so far. I wanted to touch on a point that Trevor brought up. Well, he sort of asked most of my questions, but I'll ask you anyway. If the Interior Minister is saying that the border checks are illegal, and he's got legal advice, and we're talking about him bringing some document to the executive and they refusing for it to be heard. Will the executive still get to see that legal advice that the DAERA minister would have?
Well, again, Alex, and I'm reluctant, I suppose, to maybe speak on behalf, and I know you're not asking me to speak on behalf of the Department for Agriculture, but I haven't seen any such legal advice. I would expect that the Department for Agriculture, when they bring forward, and if they bring forward a paper to the Northern Ireland Executive, that we would see clearly an outline as to the reasons why that's been brought forward. Now, I would assume, and I think that it's fair assumption, that if a minister is to bring that forward, that they would have sought certainly guidance, legal guidance as to why they feel that such a decision is necessary from the executive. And if a decision is not taken, then what that means. So the point has already been raised. For example, if it's blocked from being allowed onto the table of the executive, what will that mean? Will that mean the decision then hasn't been taken, so that halts any future or any previous decision that had already been taken without the approval? So unfortunately, Alex, that's as far as I can go in terms of, because as I say, I haven't seen any such paper, but I would expect any such paper brought forward would have detail around why the need for the paper was being brought forward in the first place.
Yeah. Thanks for the answer. Would you agree with me if there was legal advice saying that the law was being broken, that you would expect everybody or every party that was in part of the executive to obey the law?
Well, absolutely. I would expect every party and every MLA, elected representative minister, to obey the law. We are law-abiding citizens, is what we do. Of course, we need to obey the law. So if anything was brought forward to say that we were breaking the law, or that we need to take a particular action to ensure that we're following the law, then of course there's that expectation that that would be the case.
Yeah, I was interested in some of the members' comments that some of them seem to be quite keen in bringing up opinion polls, but I could bring up opinion polls about the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, I've seen opinion polls that a small minority of the people of Northern Ireland actually are opposed to the protocol. Do you, like me, your mind boggles that some members seem quite easy to trash our trade with the East and West at the expense of everything else. They're willing to see the lack of medicines coming in. They're willing to see the less trade. They're willing to see the damage to businesses, and they just don't seem to care less about somebody else's opinion or a unionist opinion. Does that not disturb you?
Well, what I would say is, look, as a unionist, I'm not afraid of north-south trade. I don't see why anybody would want to see harm in terms of the east-west, west-east trade. I don't see why that would be a sustainable position. Of course, there are those in the public domain who would say that people are quite happily for trade to be diverted elsewhere from the GB, maybe towards other markets. For me, it's about ensuring that our businesses in Northern Ireland have equal and fair treatment and access to the GB market as would be to any other constituent involved administration within the United Kingdom. So that has always been my aim. My aim has never been to try and disrupt trade north-south. My aim, and certainly the aim of the executive, needs to be to ensure that whilst we recognise the need for north-south trade to be protected as well, the same weight needs to be given to ensure that the internal market of the United Kingdom is protected and that we have unfettered access between those markets. So, of course, I do be dismayed at times when I hear people almost playing down what would be the trade with the rest of the United Kingdom. That's something that I don't agree with, and something that we certainly wouldn't be tolerating going forward. Hence the reason why we've been trying to take the position that everything needs to be done to deal with the checks that are currently in place.
Yeah. Okay, that's my questions. Thank you very much, Gary.
And thank you, Gary, for your answers today and doing that bit of a solo run towards the end there. I'm going to come back on one issue, and it's in relation to business organisations, and you suggested maybe there would be a narrower focus in dairy. The Northern Ireland, we've got correspondence today in our packs from the Northern Ireland Chamber, and they have quite a substantial report 1 year on the protocol and Brexit, and it's quite remarkable. You know, there are lots of negatives indicated about Brexit itself, the actual the UK leaving the EU and the damage that it has done, and the damage in particularly, obviously Northern Ireland was a net contributor or a net you know, from European funding, as Emma has indicated, so that has particular consequences as well. And we have real issues around it. We want to fix issues around the protocol, and I think every member of this committee realises that we do not want to inhibit any of our businesses, either doing business north, south, east, west, and that is what we're engaged on at the minute, trying to fix any areas of the protocol, but we must realise the benefits of it as well and get on with delivering the benefits of the protocol in an economic development sense for the whole of Northern Ireland. Whatever your political opinion is, our business community deserves that from all of our representatives, and I think that that's important to say. I don't want to paint that, you know, that there are members of this committee that want to see businesses suffering at all. I don't think that's true, no matter what your opinion is around the political table. But anyway, thank you so much for everything time today.
Thanks,
Gary,
Gary.
you've been very patient with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, thank you very much. I really don't think probably that there is much that we can follow up on in relation to that briefing. It is the EU negotiations and UK negotiations are ongoing. It's a very changing framework that we're working towards. I think we'll probably in the next couple of weeks find out exactly what the UK are going to do, because I think we know the situation much more clearly on the EU terms and conditions and what they have laid before us, and we will await now the moves from Liz Truss, and hopefully we'll have a new brush and maybe something much more positive than that has gone before. And I think for us in Northern Ireland, we deserve that at the very, very least. Our businesses deserve a little bit more clarity, a little bit more stability. Decision making needs to happen soon, and we have to live without threat. So that our businesses can make the investments that they need to make in the surety of a business environment that will have longevity. And I think that's important. So again, if any of the members would like to make any response to what we've had before, Trevor, you've indicated.
I wasn't being facetious about labelling of pharmaceutical products. Somebody out there probably knows what the difference in cost would be if the words "not for use outside Northern Ireland," 6 words, was added to labels for stuff that's coming over here from the UK. And I would love to know what the cost is. If it's less than a fraction of 1%, I'd be amazed. I don't know who would ask, but perhaps it might be worth just find out who to ask. You know?
I'm actually pretty confident, you know, from some of the mood music that we're hearing, is that the UK are moving in that direction and are being responsive to the EU. So I'm hoping that moves forward. I do think we've really made an advancement there from the announcements before Christmas, and hopefully that will you know, materialise within the next few days. I'm hoping that Liz Truss, when she makes her statement, that's one area that they've actually tied down.
Well then, withdraw my suggestion. I'd be interested to, maybe I've missed something before Christmas, but it would be good news. We don't want a labelling border between the UK and Northern Ireland.
We could make inquiries if you so wish. Okay. Okay, can we move on to item number 6 in the agenda, and it is our second briefing, and it is on the January monetary round, and I would refer members to pages 47 and 55 of the meeting pack from the relevant papers, and can I welcome to the meeting Dr. Dennis McMahon, the Permanent Secretary and Accounting Officer of the Executive Office. Also, Mr. Gareth Johnson, Director of Strategic Policy and Quality and Good Relations from the Executive Office, and also Ms. Tara Kennedy, Head of Finance Branch from the Executive Office. Can I advise members that are for the briefing team that the session is not being recorded? Or is it being both? It is being recorded, sorry, beg your pardon, by Hansard, and a video of the meeting will be available on the committee webpage. So can I invite Dennis to make the first briefing? And before you do start, can I wish you all, you and your team within the Executive Office, a very, very happy new year. And hopefully it will be a prosperous and healthy new year to all.
Here, here.
You're on mute, Dennis. It's the first time this year that I've said that, so that will not be the last. Still on mute.
Pick up.
He's. It's probably his speaker. Have you got headphones in?
This happened to me before Christmas when I was logged in, so sometimes it won't let you unmute, so it just stalls.
Yeah. I've been there, I've been that person.
And you just keep saying, is that it now? Can you hear me now? No.
Nope. Nope.
By going out and coming back in again.
Yeah, if in doubt, shut it down, start again.
Yes, if you want to go out and come back in
Always
again.
works.
We're very good at sign language regarding this. Okay, thank you.
Tara's working.
Tara, are you looking to come in?
Yes, sorry, I'm now back on. Yes, I'm actually in the office at the moment, but for some reason my connection just keeps going about every 15 minutes.
Talk fast, yeah.
Tara, Dennis has been locked out. He can't get in because he's on mute. Do you want to maybe start the presentation or get into the nitty-gritty of the details? Because I'm sure he'll be handing it over to you at some stage.
No problem, no problem. So I'd just like to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide you with a briefing on our approach to the January monitoring round. You'll have received the paper on the January monitoring, so I'm not going to replicate that now, but like to draw your attention to some of the detail. Before doing so, it's worth reflecting briefly on the overall picture. The Executive Office is a small department but has a very significant role requiring an agile approach and the ability to take forward work quickly on behalf of ministers and the Executive. This year, our opening budget was 120 million, with some 58 million non-ring-fenced and 62 million ring-fenced.
It's anything like the internet in this building, it's shocking. I don't know what theirs is like.
Yeah.
I can't do so much.
You should hear me now.
Here's Gareth.
Hi, Gareth.
I think Dennis was on there too. Dennis, was that you?
Yes, I think so. Can I just check? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, Dennis, we can hear you now. We thought Gareth was the last man standing.
I felt that for a second I did feel the urge to leave it that way, but unfortunately my conscience got the better of me, so I'm back on. Can you see me? I'll just check. Can you see me at all?
We can't see you, but we hear you.
Oh dear. Look, maybe what I'll do, I don't know what's going on here. I'm afraid it's just it's playing up with me today. I'll go out and try again. Apologies. One more time. I'll put it in.
Dennis, if you want in the meantime, I know Tara's connection is dodgy, but I'll take on the opening comments.
Thanks, Gareth.
Yeah. Okay, Chair. Sorry, I had to dip out there because my camera wasn't working, so I'm not sure how far Tara went.
I'd got to victims, Gareth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, looking at victims and survivors and starting there, TEO was allocated a budget of £25.7 million for the Victims Payment Scheme for permanent disablement for 21-22. 19 million of that came in June monitoring. And of that £19 million, the 74% related to redress payments. October monitoring pressures were predicted for projected implementation costs, and the department was able to move budget from redress payments for those, though I would stress that that movement of resources was purely a technical issue in the sense that it didn't impact and won't impact on individual victims' payments. So assumptions on the scheme have been reviewed for January monitoring, and a reduced requirement of some £8.8 million has now been identified for this financial year, and that's been declared as a ring-fenced easement to the Department of Finance as required by the guidance. But as we've said before, it's important to re-emphasise that this additional change in the anticipated budgetary requirements in 21-22 will not impact on payments to victims, but it just reflects the fact that now we're able to make more refined assumptions about when payments are likely to be made. We recognise and continue to recognise that given a number of uncertainties, cost estimates for the Victims Payment Scheme for Permanent Disablement and the Historical Institutional Abuse Scheme are extremely difficult to predict. And again, the HIA team has also reviewed projections and has forecast pressure this year of £0.7 million. But the department had a number of baseline easements, and we've been able to reallocate baseline budget to meet the majority of that pressure. Other movements within ring-fence funding are that there is a forecast overspend on EU Peace 4 match funding of £0.7 million. Bid will be submitted in January monitoring for that. There are a number of forecast underspends, such as in EU exit of £0.4 million, COVID of £0.2 million, SIF of £0.1 million. Those will be declared as easements in January monitoring, and it will be helpful for us to say more about those in the questions we can. Some £10 million is being made available from New Decade New Approach from the NDNA funds to support the continued delivery of the Communities in Transition project over 3 years, from 21 to 24. It's been confirmed that £2.6 million of that will be drawn down in January monitoring. Turning to our capital budget, we will be submitting an easement of £1.4 million. That's in relation to an underspend in urban villages of £1.5 million relating to Marrowbone, and the Meanan Square development project, £0.5 million, and all of that is offset by a pressure of £0.1 million in victims' payments. Just to explain those, the Marrowbone capital construction contract is out for tender, and the easement will offset any risk of a tender extension request. We expect the construction contract to be in place to enable full spend of the remaining budget. And in relation to the Meanan Square development project, Urban Villages and their delivery partner Apex Housing Association are in discussion with the site owners regarding the site purchase, and we hope to be in a position to take the project forward soon. So I hope that's helpful in terms of the technicalities of the monitoring round, and of course we are happy to take questions from members on any of the issues that have been raised.
Thank you very much, Gareth, on that. Just before maybe we go into questions, I'm going to ask Dennis. Dennis, did you want to make any opening statement, just that you were prevented from doing so?
No, I Gareth did a fantastic job at saying what I wanted to say, and what I just the only thing I'd like to add is to reciprocate that I hope all the members have a good year ahead, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Well, the first question that I want to ask is in relation to, you mentioned the race branch and it being restructured. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? What kind of structure is it to have? And, you know, some of the spend that you have indicated is around staffing. And just what difference is the staffing structure, and what difference will it make to the departments that you're working with?
Maybe I'll start and Gareth can come in with more detail. I suppose the first thing is, when we're talking about a structure, it's actually about just getting people in. The team it's a small team. It's always been a small team. It's produced an awful lot of outputs in terms of the Minority Ethnic Development Fund, various policies and strategy documents. So the idea is really to enhance that, and in the position we're in now, we're doing that through all means. So we're hoping to get some additional staff in the next month across the department. We'll be looking, you know, racial equality will be absolutely a top priority in the middle of all of that. In addition to that, we're also in very regular meetings with agencies. So we've, you know, I think when I first came here, I made the point that staffing was going to be absolutely at the centre of everything we do. So again, it's really important that the racial equality team gets some more capacity. But I suppose the other point I would make is we're really keen to focus our efforts down on interventions that make the biggest difference. So we know the Minority Ethnic Development Fund is obviously central to a lot of what we do. But in addition to that, we've undertaken a stocktake exercise. We've also had a really good with the racial equality subgroup. And there are a number of issues that we want to really focus on. The first one is to get training and development across departments, because I suppose one of the things we're looking at now is how we can mainstream a lot of the work that's been done and really get more of an impact. And also, when we started on the journey in terms of racial equality, it was a very different issue to where we are today. A lot of very similar issues, unfortunately, that we're dealing with as well. But actually, it's a much more significant issue for the economy, for society, and you can see that in a whole range of different ways. So there's training and development. There's focus on the legislative aspects. And really, it's about making sure that those elements are brought together. And the other aspect that's absolutely vital is making sure that we're monitoring racial equality across departments. And we've had a lot of interactive work, bringing together the departments, bringing together statisticians. Statisticians have produced new guidance on that. So really, there's more of that needs to be done, and it's about. It's not we're saying that all of the different interventions that we've been looking at in the past are unimportant. What we're saying is we need to really focus our efforts, get the very best of the people we have, and make sure that we're really working on a co-design basis. So, sorry, maybe I went on a bit too long, but Gareth, I don't know if it's anything I've missed there.
Well, I can give some indication of how we've been growing the resource in the racial equality unit. We had started off on that side with 5 members of staff plus a part-time person who was on loan. We'd added 3 on migration and legislation specifically. We've now been looking to supplement that with staff on an agency basis for now, given the challenges Dennis has mentioned that there are in resourcing generally across the civil service. We have got a partnership ongoing with one of the recruitment agencies, and currently having weekly meetings with them to get additional staff resource. And I have to say, some impressive people and some impressive CVs coming through there. And in the race and infrastructure division, I have to emphasise this is at the divisional level because the division deals with some infrastructure projects, Ebrington and so on, as well as the race side. But in that division so far, we've had 4 of those staff join it, and we're looking for, or 4 of those staff have been placed, and we're looking for a 5th to be placed in the very near future. So there has absolutely been an emphasis on growing the resource. Dennis has mentioned 3 particular areas from the stocktake monitoring, training, legislation. We're having a meeting on Monday with the subgroup and with race champions, and we're proposing to focus on particularly on how we move forward in practice on the training and development issues, and what sources of expertise we can access to make that happen. We've got material on monitoring out for people to look at the moment that statisticians have been working on, and we're aiming to start the consultation on the changes to race relations order next month in February. So let's say lots of focus on the area.
Thank you for that, Gareth. And I mean, I absolutely support building your capacity and resource within the department. And I think one of the areas of concern at a previous briefing before Christmas was the fact that, you needed very strong project management in order to deliver the outcomes that were required. And that needs a really strong team within the department. You can't go from one issue or one problem to the next without a strong project management team in place. So it's very welcome that. The other issue that I just want to raise is the 8.8 million considerable underspend in relation to the redress payments. And how has this come about? Is it the fact that there haven't been applications coming forward, and how do you feel that you're going to go and address that in order to, highlight the actual project itself and ensure that people know that this is up and running at the moment? So can you talk me through that 8.8, please?
So again, Gareth can go into the detail a bit more, but the key piece in this is that this is based on, we've been basing the payments on modelling exercises, and one of the questions we've had in terms of even our accounts, not just in terms of this particular scheme, but in terms of all of these schemes where we're making payments, has been how we actually classify the expenditure. So for example, a lot of our expenditures classified as contingent liability, and this reflects the fact that there are some uncertainties there. So but by the way, that doesn't take away at all from what you're saying, because part of this is about these are demand-led schemes, and we need to make sure that we are building our communication and our engagement. Because the Victims and Survivors Service works with us in a number of different ways, and because we work with the Redress Board very closely, we are seeking to make sure that it's as person-centred as possible, so we are attracting people in. But to some extent, this is to be expected with a new scheme. And maybe, Gareth, if I hand over to you to say a bit more about the details as to how that's done with the Government Actuary Department.
Yes, I can confirm that there has been lots of interest in the scheme. There have been 1,283 applications so far. I understand from the victims' organisations who are supporting victims and survivors in bringing forward applications, that there are many more who are in contact with them wanting to bring applications forward, and the welfare advisors will be working through all of those cases with individual victims and survivors. In fact, we have strengthened the number of welfare advisors who are we're funding in the sector specifically to concentrate on this. So there's certainly no lack of interest in the scheme, and that's good and that's important. But the £8.8 million really just is timing differences, where at an earlier part of the year we thought it best to be careful in what money we were projecting and keeping might be spent by the board this year, and just things have not progressed quite to that extent. And members will recall that the start date of the scheme was put back by a couple of months to let everybody prepare for the introduction of the scheme, and that's had an impact. So again, to say none of this will impact on what people are getting paid. In fact, what I can say is that the first two cases, the first two applications to be approved by the board are now in the process of being paid. So we're actually seeing people getting the money to which they are entitled and deserve, and we're starting to see those cases come through. Now, this continues to be a big challenge for us. There are three areas of uncertainty. We don't know exactly how many people were injured and still experiencing permanent disablement in the troubles and the conflict. Secondly, we don't know how many of them will come forward for victims' payments. And thirdly, we don't know the severity of the symptoms that they're currently experiencing. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. But we have worked to build estimates, and we are continuing to work and have extended our arrangement with the Government Actuaries Department so we can get some specialist input. What we're envisaging is that coming into next summer, with the advantage of the first financial year of figures, they will go back and will revisit their assumptions, and that will be done a couple of times each year from then on through the life of the scheme. So we can hopefully, as time goes on, get to more and more accurate estimates. But at this stage, it's very difficult to make accurate estimates, and that's what's reflected in the figures. But victims can be assured there is a legal obligation on the department to pay awards that are made by the board.
Okay, Gareth, can I bring in John Stewart?
Thanks, Chair. Dennis, Tara, Gareth, thank you very much for your presentation so far, and Happy New Year to all three of you. Hope you're all well. The Chair's covered a couple of the issues I was going to go into, but one of the other ones, Dennis, you mentioned about the £10 million for the Communities in Transition Fund over the next 3 years, which is good news, especially for those delivering the scheme. Has that been rolled out to the delivery agents on the ground that they're going to be able to avail of that over the next 3 years to give them security of that funding? And it takes me on to another point, given will a 3-year budget now offer more security in terms of delivery to those groups? Because one of the big issues we continually hear from charities and organisations and volunteer groups who are delivering projects on behalf of the executive is that they never know when the next pound's coming, because they're always looking at a 1-year budget, and it makes it very difficult to plan. So I'm just wondering thoughts around that, and if that information is now being communicated to such groups.
I can come in there and to reiterate your good wishes, John, for the new year. This is relevant not just to communities in transition, but to our wider good relations work, where we're funding a whole range of groups, and obviously funding certainty is important for them. Now, we certainly have communicated about the funding that's available, but and in fact in Communities in Transition we're now into phase 2 of the project, and a new set of projects that are coming through, building on the last set, and I have to say it was encouraging to see the Independent Reporting Commission recently, who commented very favourably on what had been achieved through Communities in Transition. They said it had been a slightly slow start, but really had come round, and I think that's testament to the work not just of my team but of all the community partners who are involved. One of the challenges, just practical challenges we have, is that we need to have gone out with our applications process before we have confirmation of the budget, and so in the Good Relations Fund, for example, what we've gone out with has been for a 1-year fund, because that was all we had confirmation with at the time. The 3-year budget is obviously still a draft budget, and after the consultation will come back for agreement by the executive. But there have been discussions internally about this, and certainly if we get a 3-year budget, then I think we would want to look at what we could do going forward to give groups who are applying a little bit more security. So it's something that's actively being considered, but we do need to wait for confirmation from the executive first.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gareth. I think you're absolutely right about that security. That you know, it's very difficult to run a budget, as you know, as an accounting officers. That on a 1-year basis, it's very difficult to plan anything. So anything that can be done, that would be very helpful. I was trying to look at the information you'd sent through, but my laptop's died, so I can't actually see. But one of the things I'd written down here was the High Street Task Force. I'm just wondering what, if any, money's been allocated to that. And do you envisage an indicative budget this year or next for that task force once it's properly up and running for its consultation? Or have I got the wrong department?
No, Dennis.
This is something that there's a lot going on at the minute around this, and I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I just need to double check that with Gareth and Tara. I don't think there's anything in our budget, but we'll need to. I haven't seen it, but maybe apologies if that's incorrect. But if this is being run by a secretariat in DFC, and there's been a huge amount of engagement over the last year, but some of it has been more successful. Some of that engagement's been more successful than in other cases. And junior ministers recently decided that they wanted a bit of an additional push on it. So had a really helpful engagement with DFC colleagues and colleagues from across departments. And we're looking again at a much more focused approach that can deliver more. So for example, there's a so-called craft kit by the Ministerial Advisory Group on architecture, and this is going to be used. We're hoping that this will be used as a way of getting a redesign of high streets, because if you look at a lot of high streets, take for example the likes of Bangor High Street, you can see more and more art projects infiltrating the empty spaces, because turning it into a destination, turning it into somewhere that people want to go. The investment strategy has got a very specific references in this, and this is something that's very soon to be put out, and we're expecting to see that. That'll be a good vehicle for some significant expenditure, and then on top of that, we'll be looking at areas such as planning. We'll be looking at challenge funds, and we'll be looking at the idea of additional work around the rates reform process, which is underway, and DOF's been doing work on this already. So to answer your question, there has been a lot of resource in DFC in terms of the Secretariat and the work that's been done on that. That resource we're also working very closely with them, so we're adding to that. But I'm not sure just exactly how much of that we're funding specifically from our budget. It's probably not like in the hundreds of thousands. So Gareth, do you want to just add, is there a figure there?
Tara might have a figure, but I think because our staffing is all managed centrally, just the staff input that we've been given has just been part of that central pot. Going forward, we have been looking to carve out an agile policy development fund as part of our budget going forward, precisely to deal with some of these important areas that come up that can't always predict what's going to come up, but to give us a bit more flexibility around those. But Tara can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it'll just have been picked up in our central salaries budget.
Yes, you're quite correct, Gareth. At the moment, there's no specific funding for this. We haven't received any specific funding.
I mean, it's not. I think the important point is there is a significant resource in DFC, and all the departments are working on it. So in a way, it's a great example of the way things should work and sort of cross-cutting approach. And we've had a fantastic partnership with Mark O'Donnell in particular, who's the senior official, who's the senior responsible owner within DFC. So all of that's really good, and there is the resource there, and that probably so apologies if I wasn't able to. I didn't want to mislead you by saying there was no budget at all specifically identified, because I thought that, knowing my lot, there would be just some very small funding, but actually the main resource has been through people and working together. Okay, I don't know if that's helpful.
No, that is, Dennis. Thank you all three for that. I think it was probably my fault initially, because naively, potentially, I thought that it was TU that was overseeing the delivery of High Street Task Force. That was my understanding.
It is.
At the minute,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but the research. So I suppose the point is, when we were on the Economy Committee, there was a lot of anticipation and a lot of hope for this. And I know, as someone that's been involved in town centre regeneration for years, there's a lot of hope among our town centres across the country about what this can achieve. And it's great to see that the work DFC is doing. I just hope that ultimately there will be a pot of money and the expertise, which undoubtedly you'll have in the department, to deliver this. I think a lot of research happening, a lot of going out and consulting. What do we need to see? But when you build those expectations up, then you need to see the delivery. So hopefully, I suppose what my point is, let's hope that there's money in the budget to deliver what actually are identified as key problems, and it sounds like that is the intention. So that's good news.
Yeah, so just to say that there's a draft reports have been produced around the consultations so far, so all of that's been put together. I think the key thing now is really focusing it down to a small number of real deliverables, and you can talk to somebody in the street and they'd understand it, and money being part of that and underpinning that. So we are doing that piece of work, and to be fair, I'll just be very straight about it. I mean, ministers were very keen to sort of give it a bit of re-energize it, because I suppose with the Omicron and everything else happening, it was hard to keep the momentum going. So they asked me specifically. That's why colleagues aren't able to maybe talk about it on this particular occasion in more detail, because they asked me to take a personal interest in it, as indeed they did earlier on with some of the racial equality work, just to make sure that we got we just refocused our efforts. So typically when you hear us saying the word stock taking in this department, it has a particular meaning, which means just really not just taking a general stock take, but going in and really saying, can we give this a bit of life?
Yeah, I think just one for the chair, it's probably given the cross-cutting nature of this project, whether it's the Department of Economy, DFC, TO, as you've already said, Dennis, it's probably something we as a committee need to hook up with other committees, given how important that work's going to be. The last thing just I have down is about easements. Gareth mentioned a couple. I think there was one under COVID recovery or COVID spending. Just wondering if there's anything of note in there that you picked up on.
There's nothing particularly of note. It was just again that we've been fairly generous in what we set aside, and there's been a relatively small underspend. I think it's a couple of £100,000 in the departmental scheme of things. Likewise, on the EU exit side, actually one of the very practical things that influenced that was that the expectation was there'd be quite a bit of travel back and forward to Europe. Of course, with the pandemic and everything being done virtually, that hasn't happened in the same way. So there's no kind of one thing that I can point to on those. It's just been that the expectations and the reality didn't quite match.
Brilliant. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Can I bring Sheehan into the spotlight, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to officials for coming along today. You have identified some pressures relating to staff costs for the strategy for ending violence against women and girls, as well as the issue around the mother and babies institutions. And there's also, you identify a need for additional funding in relation to the historical institutional abuse. And I'm just wondering, you know, I'm sure there's some of those victims who are looking in today. And given that there have been, you know, decades-long delays in redress and setting up inquiries and so on, can you be sure, Dennis, that these pressures are going to be resolved and won't lead to any more delays in resolving these particular issues? Thanks. You're on mute, Dennis.
Sorry, apologies. We do, just not having a good day with the technology, my fault. I suppose the one thing I did say the first time come up in front of the committee would be very open about problems that we had and have. And our staffing situation is not great. You know, it started off early. We've made some improvements to it. Gareth talked about some of those in relation to racial equality. We've got now really particularly in terms of violence against women and girls, we've got a really excellent official leading that, but needs to have some support. So we're doing everything we can to get people in. Actually, to be fair, there are issues in the labour market at the minute anyway, and people have different attitudes. So I'm not making this is not to make excuses. By the way, the reason I was saying this was because I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. Not going to pretend we've got all the resources we have because we need, because we certainly don't. And we will be relying very much on the sort of work that's going on with our colleagues in Department of Finance, where they're undertaking a review of the recruitment process to try and speed that up. But in the meantime, we're not waiting for that. We're bidding for all the staff we can get. We're centrally. We're also then working, as Gareth has said, and just to reassure you, this is of such importance that I personally have set up those meetings, and I meet with Gareth and the team, meet with the agency that's meeting our short-term needs. It's not ideal, but it's the only way we can do it. And we are doing that weekly. So it's not a sort of we're just waiting to see what happens. So what I can reassure you is what we have done is some of these issues have come to us and don't want to track over the ground in getting to us. But these issues have come to us, and there was various discussions. And victims don't want to know. They just want to know. They don't want to know about our processes. They want to know that they're going to get the support. And all I can say is that the team are knocking themselves out to get as much resource as we can in place, to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and to use an agile approach as possible. And frankly, what we're doing while we're building up our resources, we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, if you know what I mean, within the department, and we're moving people around. So I have to say, on the plus side, if there are anybody listening to this who's interested in coming to work in TEO, it's a very lively environment, and you'll probably get a lot of opportunities to try a number of different things in one go. But it has its challenges. And we're just being as flexible as we can. So that's the commitment. The commitment I can give is we will give it 120% and do our very best with the resources we have, and we will bring in more resources than that. So that's the best I can say. It's an honest answer.
Okay, thanks for that. And maybe you might get a few potential recruits after the 5th of May.
We'll take it all we can get.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Emma Sheeran into the spotlight, please?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thanks a million, Chair, and thank you to yourselves for the presentation thus far, notwithstanding the technical issues that you had and why I've been cut off twice during this meeting as well, so I can relate. I just had a question around the EU, the Brexit underspend that's referenced in the document. We've had presentations from the Equality Commission and the Human Rights Commission, and the Equality Commission had alerted us to the fact that their funding had decreased, and we also have an issue whereby one of their certifications was in danger because of a funding problem. And I just wondered if there had been any conversations around using some of that underspend to supply the dedicated mechanisms with the funding that they need to carry out their role.
Well, again, Gareth could talk through the detail on this. We have actually allocated there are a number of pressures in addition to some underspends across the arm's length bodies. There are a number of pressures, and we're moving money across, additional money into the arm's length bodies. So I'm not aware of any pressures that we're not meeting in year. But again, Gareth, if there's any other pressures that you're aware of, and I would say it has been a struggle for the arm's length bodies, and I know from talking to the Equality Commission Chief Executive well, because I've worked previously in this area, and I know Evelyn would say that they have had reductions over the years, and quite correctly. So I know there are longer term pressures, but this year I think we should be able to meet all needs. Gareth, can you just confirm that?
Yeah, I think the issue about the dedicated mechanism is, and I'm right in saying this, not so much this year, but in the slightly longer term, in that the UK government had put up funding for this, which originally we'd envisaged would be on an ongoing basis, but it turns out has just been for an initial period. Tara, I think maybe is it 3 years? Yeah.
Yes, and could I also just clarify too that EU exit money, it's ring fenced, so it can only go for EU exit, so we have to hand it back to the centre. So there are two separate funding streams as well that we can't offset.
Yeah, but on dedicated mechanism particularly, now I know we have an ongoing discussion with the Equality Commission about their resources and their staffing levels, and I know there is more that they could do if there was more resource available, but specifically on the dedicated mechanism, it's really a problem slightly down the line, but one obviously we need to be alert to and we'll need to discuss further, and to be honest, the ideal would be if the NIO that had constructed the dedicated mechanism and is funding it for now, if they would continue that funding into the longer term.
Okay. Are you happy enough with that, Emma? Can I ask a little indulgence here about my constituency, and particularly the 0.5 million for Meanan Square? And you've indicated that negotiations are still taking place between Apex and the property owner or the landowner. You indicated that should be concluded soon. How soon is soon?
I think the issue there depends on agreement, and there's been a number of options passed back and forth, and I suppose it's I'm not sure how much detail we can go into, Gareth, without getting into negotiations.
I think what I would say is that this is not all in the Executive Office's hands. There are other parties who are involved, but we're certainly doing all that we can to bring this to a conclusion, and absolutely there's commitment within TEO to the project.
I mean, it's a significant investment opportunity for the Bogside area. It's sitting as an eyesore at the moment and has been for a considerable time, and to find an underspend because of lack of progress in terms of negotiations and purchasing is difficult. It's difficult for that area. So with my constituency hat on, I urge the department to move this forward as quickly as possible. Okay, has any other members any questions? I have no indications at this point. No?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your answers today and for your briefing. It's been very helpful and it's cleared up quite a few matters.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Chair.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, that was at least, this department doesn't have an awful lot of spend compared to other departments, and suppose, in the scheme of things, they're fairly small amounts of money, but they're fairly significant to those that are in receipt of them. Has any members any issues that you would like us to take forward?
Just that point they raised, Chair, about the High Street Task Force.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite an all-encompassing body. There's a lot of hope, I think, for what it can deliver, especially on the ground in our struggling town centres. And I know those of us that have been championing what it could output want to see it deliver to the best of its potential. And it feels at the minute that there's a lot of things happening in different places, perhaps stuff we're not even seeing. It would be maybe good. I know time's against us, but if we could have some sort of joint committee meeting with the various committees that are involved, and looking at then ultimately how does all the stuff that's been pulled together and all the investment and good work and research and consultation actually turn into delivery on the ground. Because people for years, as you know, you have all these great strategies and all these great plans, but ultimately nothing ever gets built, nothing ever happens, and that's a big frustration about delivery. And I think this would be a real shame to miss this huge opportunity.
And I think really, the Executive Office were purposely put themselves forward in order that they would be the font of all the knowledge from all of the different departments, in terms of the Department for the Economy, Department for Infrastructure, the Department for Communities, and they were the holding department in order to ensure that there was delivery there. And sometimes it feels as if every time you ask a question, oh, that's not our role, that's communities, but they have to pull the information from everybody else and deliver it. If you lead something, then you lead it. And you can't keep on saying, oh, that's back, it's not here, it's there. It has to be actually here if you're the leader of it. And I think that there is a bit mismatch, and I think you got to that as well. The other thing that I would probably just observe, agency staffing is a concern. We see it as a concern, particularly within the Department of Health. But, within the civil service, if you rely on agency staffing, there's a lack of continuity there. There's, it conflicts with delivery of programmes, really important programmes. And if you're at the very front face of interacting with victims, whether it's victims of historical institute abuse or mothers and babies, you need continuity of service and continuity of delivery and continuity of communication. Staff with the greatest will in the world, it's difficult to do it. Until we move into a place where you've got permanent appointments working in departments, I can understand that Dennis is going to have real problems in some of that project management piece that we really, really desperately need to happen. Those would be the only observations, but I agree with the spend profile in trying to get those issues resolved.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody else want to make any observations and maybe any actions from that? I don't. No? Okay. Right, okay. Item number 7, Forward Work Programme. Can I refer members to pages 56 and 62 of the meeting pack for the Forward Work Programme? Members, the committee is sponsoring the Victims and Survivors Forum to hold a meeting in the Long Gallery on Tuesday the 18th of January. The motion has been put before the Assembly as well, so it's going to be a busy day for committee members. The format of the meeting will be an hour-long meeting for the forum, followed by an interactive buffet lunch with members at approximately 1 p.m. Members, the timings again are subject to change, with the motion being scheduled in the same day as indicated. Also, members, the UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss replaced Lord Frost, as we know, as the UK's lead negotiator. just before Christmas. Liz Truss is unable to attend the scheduled meeting that we had here on the 19th of January with the committee, and her team have advised that the Minister of State, Minister for Europe, Chris Heaton-Harris, may be available to attend. Minister Heaton-Harris's responsibilities include the trade and cooperation agreement negotiations, including the Northern Ireland Protocol. Liz Truss has been approached for an alternative date. I don't believe that there has been any progress. No. So we're still, the approach has been made, but and the offer of the Chris Heaton Harris has been made as well. So, members, can I seek your agreement that we invite Minister Heaton-Harris to the scheduled meeting on the 19th of January and to invite Liz Truss at a later date? Okay, happy? Right, that's fine, thank you. And if you're content, we'll note the remainder of the forward work programme. Okay, our item number 8 is correspondence. There are 23 items of correspondence between pages 63 and 316 in the meeting pack, and 2 items in pages 17 to 35 in the table pack. Members, can I refer you to pages 21 to 35 of the table pack? They're an SL1 in relation to the Department's transfer of functions to Appeals Services order, which will transfer statutory responsibility for the Appeals Service and Rent Assessment Panel from the Department for Communities to the Department of Justice. Can I seek members' agreement to write to the Committee of Justice and to the Committee for Communities for their views on the proposed legislation? Happy to do so.
Yep.
Okay. Item number 8.1, House of Lords European Affairs Subcommittee on the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, to Conor Burns, Minister of State, Northern Ireland Office. Article 2 on the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, and again an update. We've actually discussed some of that with the junior ministers earlier. And again, 8.2 is from the House of Lords European Affairs Committee on the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, to Lord Frost. And this was a letter from Lord Ray to Conor Burns, and it is quite insightful. So item number 8.3, the House of Lords Common Framework Committee, Welsh Parliament. We've also had correspondence from the First and Deputy First Minister to Assembly Speaker, update on the exemption of wearing of face masks. Excuse me, everybody, I've got a tick on my throat. I'm just going to go through, I'm going to note item number 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, 8.10 and 8.11 on the papers, but I just want to draw your attention to 8.11. We wrote to the Executive Office regarding the NA commitment regarding sub-regional equality, and if members have read the correspondence or the response back, I have to say I was very dismayed with it. There was a very lack of detail and really a lack of understanding of the content of the letter in relation to sub-regional inequality. I would suggest that we write again to the First and Deputy First Minister just for clarification on the sub-regional equality commitments, because that's what the basis of the question was, and it wasn't really what the answer was in the document. So if you're happy enough for us just to ask for further clarification on that. Can we just note item number 8.12? Can we note item 8.13, 8.14, 8.15, 8.16? And 8.16 is the Committee for Finance, the draft budget. Can I seek agreement to schedule an evidence session with officials to scrutinise plans for the departmental budget? And that's the 3-year budget. So if we can look at that sometime when it can be arranged. Okay, note 8.17, 8.18, 8.19, the Rosetta Trust reconvened committee for the Executive Office meeting on the 17th. Can I remind members that the committee wrote to the First and Deputy First Minister in relation to a number of areas of concern regarding the review of the redress process and the apology to victims and survivors of the historical institutional abuse. Once again, can I seek agreement to write to the Commissioner for survivors of childhood institutional abuse to seek specific views around the memorial?
Absolutely.
Okay. 8.20, again, I referred to it earlier when we were speaking to the Junior Minister, is a report from the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Brexit 1 year on, and there was no surprises there really, the negatives around Brexit and the positives around the protocol and trying to fix what isn't working. So we now know the established response from the business community. 8.21, Women's Resource and Development Agency, a briefing on the Executive's Office engagement with the women's sector. I read this report with a bit of concern. It really indicates, they've indicated that there was far too little consultation with women in the drawing up of the COVID recovery plan. They've expressed this to me in person at numerous meetings, despite all the data that is before us, showing that women have suffered disproportionately from the pandemic, for example, because they are more likely to work in sectors that were subject to lockdown, and they were more likely to be affected by the loss of childcare and the need to do home teaching. So I suppose, or I propose, that the committee writes to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister to make these points and seek their assurance that consultation with women's organisations in the future is upfront and improved and is central to any COVID recovery plans. And I think this was a great oversight. Okay, so you're happy for us to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, 8.12, we'll leave it as read. 8.23, an individual made contact with us regarding COVID-19 restrictions and subsidies. I think perhaps we should forward that letter personally to the Economy Minister because it's directed at criticisms, for his department and himself. So. A final piece of correspondence is 8.24, the Executive Office response for COVID recovery, request for regular updates. Members, you'll remember that the Committee for the Economy wrote to the committee asking to approach the Department on the issue of ventilations and grants for high-risk setting. This has been aired quite a lot this week in relation to the schools. So can I seek your agreement that we forward the response to the Economy Committee? Okay. So members, are you content to note the rest of the correspondence?
Yep.
Item number 9, any other business? Have any members any other business? Nope. No. Okay. The date, time and place of the next meeting will be Wednesday the 19th of January at 2 p.m. in room 30. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.